Hello and welcome to Earthy Goodness Kitchen. My name is George and today we're going to be creating a 3-course fine dining meal that you can cook at home. This is going to be great for if you want to impress your friends, your family or a partner, and I'm going to keep it fairly simple so you don't have to use lots of equipment or spend hours in the kitchen. So we'll be starting with king oyster mushroom scallops with a cauliflower puree and gremolata. We'll then make a tofu steak with dauphinoise, roast cherry tomatoes and broccoli. And then we'll finish off with some chocolate mousse with crumbling berries. If you do enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe and drop a comment down below for any suggestions of other videos you want me to make. Maybe I'll do some different cuisines. I could do like a 3-course Italian meal or a 3-course Mexican meal. And let's get cooking. Grab yourself an apron and let's do this. We're going to start by chopping the cauliflower. Don't worry too much about the size as it will all get blended together at the end. Next we'll peel and slice our onion, once again not worrying too much about the size. Then the same with the garlic, just give it a quick slice through. Then we're going to pick some fresh thyme. You can always use dried if you don't have any fresh. Heat up a generous tablespoon of olive oil. We're going to add in the onion, garlic and thyme and let that sweat down for a couple of minutes. Then we'll throw in the cauliflower and cook it for around 6 to 8 minutes so it gets a nice bit of caramelization on it. Which is going to help give the cauliflower puree a really nice flavour. While this is cooking, be sure to season with salt and pepper. We're also going to add a nice knob of vegan butter, which is going to help with the caramelisation. Since we are going for restaurant quality food here, we are going to use a little bit more salt and also butter than you might in your normal cooking, but that's going to make the difference between just like home cooking and the sort of food you get in the restaurants. You can now add in your vegan cream and vegetable stock. I'm going to be using an Oakley vegan cream. Let that simmer for 5 to 8 minutes. If it starts to look a little bit dry, then you can add a little more vegetable stock, but be careful not to add too much or else your puree will be a bit too runny, more like a soup. Get it all into a blender and blitz until beautifully creamy and smooth. We'll now prepare the king oyster mushrooms. They've got a beautiful soft texture with a slight chew to them, which is going to replicate the scallops perfectly. We'll chop them into little scallop-sized pieces. I'm going to discard the tops and we'll use them in a stir fry or something later on. These types of mushrooms can be quite expensive, but in comparison to scallops, they are a lot cheaper. Before frying the mushrooms, we're going to make a quick gremolata, which sounds very fancy, but in reality it's simply chopped parsley, lemon zest, and garlic. We'll be making a slightly different version, which is going to include some toasted breadcrumbs, and that's going to add a lovely crunch over the mushrooms. In a heavy base pan, heat up a tablespoon of oil over a nice heat. Once the oil is nearly smoking, place in your mushroom pieces and cook for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side. I'm going to add a little bit of extra butter about halfway through the cooking and also some thyme to add a nice bit of flavour, and we're going to season the mushrooms with salt and pepper on both sides. We'll then make a quick sauce in the pan by deglazing it with white wine. We'll then add in the vegetable stock, a touch of miso and marmite for that salty umami flavour, and a little bit of powdered seaweed, which is going to add that sort of fishy taste to replicate what you'd get with scallops. You can always leave this out if you don't want that fishy taste. You can then add the mushrooms back in and let them soak up the delicious sauce. We've now got all the elements ready for the starter, so we'll start off with a nice dollop of cauliflower puree. Then place the mushrooms on top with a bit of the delicious white wine sauce. And finally, sprinkle over that crispy, fresh gremolata. So there we have it, delicious pan-fried scallops with a creamy cauliflower puree, the gremolata, and I did add a few extra capers there, which I forgot to mention earlier. So let's give it a little taste. So good. I mean, they pretty much taste like scallops to be honest, so I'd say that's a win right there. Okay, so now we're going to make the tofu steak, dauphinoise, roast cherry tomato and a bit of steamed broccoli. So we're going to start by marinating the tofu and then we'll make the dauphinoise. I'm going to use these little dishes, but you could use one big dish and then just scoop it out afterwards, but I'm going to go for 2 individual sort of pie dishes here. So I'm going to use a nice extra firm tofu for the steak. That's going to give it a nice meaty texture. I'll then cut a crisscross pattern in the top. That's going to help the flavours absorb into the tofu, and when we fry it, it's going to help make it extra crispy. For the marinade, we've got soy sauce, marmite, liquid smoke, maple syrup and tomato puree. I haven't really seen liquid smoke in regular supermarkets, so you might have to go online to get that. We'll then whisk in some vegetable stock so there's enough to marinate all the pieces of tofu. Ideally marinate the tofu overnight, but if you've only got, say, 15 minutes, then that will do perfectly. The marinade is then going to be used as a sauce when we cook it. For the dauphinoise, we've got a nice floury potato. I've got a Maris Piper variety here. We're then going to peel them all and slice them into thin little rounds. Then into a medium saucepan, we're going to add vegan butter, 1 garlic clove grated, oat milk, vegan cream, a pinch of ground nutmeg, 1 bay leaf, and a little bit of fresh thyme. You can always use dried if you don't have any fresh. We'll then bring this all to a simmer and cook it for around 8 to 10 minutes until the potatoes have a slight bit of tenderness to them, but still sort of hold together and aren't crumbling apart. With a slotted spoon, we're then going to scoop out the potatoes into your serving dish. Then add enough sauce so it comes up just below the top layer of the potatoes. If you do have a vegan cheese that you like, you can put this in between the layers of potato. I've personally made a homemade parmesan. It's really simple. You blend up roasted cashews, nutritional yeast, a little bit of ground garlic and some salt, so I'm going to use that to top the dauphinoise. Bake your dauphinoise in the oven at around 200 degrees until nice and brown on top and the potatoes are beautifully soft. We'll now fry the tofu steaks. Sadly my camera did just die and I lost a little bit of footage, but all that was missed was me removing the tofu steaks from the marinade, patting them dry, and dusting them in a little corn flour. Next I heated up a tablespoon of olive oil in a heavy base saucepan over a high heat. Once it was nearly smoking hot, I added the tofu and we're going to cook it for 4 to 5 minutes on each side until it's nice and crispy and golden. I've also thrown in the cherry tomatoes here so they get a nice bit of colour on them. If the pan starts to dry out or it's burning, then just add a little bit of extra oil. I'm also going to add in some herbs and a crushed garlic clove, which are going to add a little bit of extra flavour to the tofu steaks. To get even more beautiful caramelisation on the tofu steaks, we're going to add in a bit of butter, and that's going to really caramelise the outsides. In the same pan, we're now going to make a really delicious red wine sauce. Start by deglazing the pan with red wine, then reduce the wine a little bit and add in your leftover marinade, and we're going to reduce this to make a nice thick sauce. Finish off the sauce with a little vegan butter, which is going to make it nice and glossy and thick, and then we'll throw in the tofu steaks and cherry tomatoes and get them coated in the sauce. So that is your main course ready to go. I'm going to serve it with some tender stem broccoli, which I've simply cooked in boiling water for about 2.5 minutes. You can keep your dauphinoise in the dish or you can serve it up on the plate, it's totally up to you. So there we have it, we've got the delicious pan-fried tofu steak, we've got the dauphinoise, we've got some nice pan-fried cherry tomatoes, and a little bit of broccoli going on there, and a little red wine sauce to finish it off. Let's give it a little taste now. That is so good. The red wine adds a really nice depth of flavour to the sauce, and the liquid smoke and the marmite makes it really meaty and delicious. And then you've got the nice crispy topping on the dauphinoise. So yeah, that is the main course. Now we're going to move on to pudding. Last but not least, we're going to make the chocolate mousse with the crumble and some berries. We'll start by making a delicious crumble to top the chocolate mousse, starting with plain flour, caster sugar and soft brown sugar. Then we're going to rub the butter into the flour mixture using our fingertips to create a nice crumbly texture. Spread it out on a baking tray lined with baking paper or a silicone sheet. We'll then bake it for 15 to 20 minutes, giving it a stir every now and again to make sure it's not burning in any areas. By then you want it to be a beautiful golden colour, and that means it's going to be delicious and crunchy, and all you need to do is let it cool down. The chocolate mousse recipe is super simple. All you're going to need is a food processor or a blender. If you do use a blender, you may need to add a little bit of plant milk to loosen it up a little bit. We're going to add the silken tofu into the food processor, and no, the final product is not going to taste anything like tofu, as we've got lots of delicious flavourings to go in. So in goes melted dark chocolate, which I've left to cool just for a little bit, medjool dates, maple syrup, cocoa powder, vanilla paste or essence, it's totally up to you, and a little pinch of salt, which really brings out the nice chocolatey flavour. Simply blend up the ingredients until you've got a beautiful, smooth, creamy chocolate mousse. Ideally you want to use quite soft dates. In this video mine was slightly dry, so there's a couple of little chunks of date in the chocolate mousse, which actually was quite nice because you get little chewy bits of date in there. Or you could not use dates and just use a little bit of extra maple syrup. Finally, defrost your berries. You could use raspberries, strawberries, blueberries. I'm actually going to use some cherries here. They've got a really nice sour tang to them. You don't want to add any sugar to your berries, as the chocolate mousse and the crumble is already very sweet. To make these chocolate mousses look even more special, I'm going to add a little dusting of icing sugar to finish them off. And there is the final dish, a delicious chocolate mousse with a really crunchy crumble and some little cherries on top. So let's give it a taste. Oh, that's looking good. You definitely don't need to add any sugar to the berries, as the chocolate mousse and the crumble's already quite sweet. Super creamy, super delicious. Okay, that is the end of the video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, be sure to subscribe. And just a massive thank you for making it this far through the video. Drop a comment in the comment section saying get some goodness, so that I know who made it all the way through the video. I think that's a fun little thing to do. So yeah, I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye bye.